My wife's family mocked me at my father's funeral until the Duke's will was read aloud. I stood before my father's coffin in borrowed mourning clothes while my wife's mother laughed behind her gloved hand. "Look at the pauper," Lady Beatrice whispered loud enough for the entire chapel to hear. "Even his grief is second-hand." My wife, Constance, turned her face away, her silence more cutting than any insult. I had known humiliation before, had tasted it like ash on my tongue for 3 years of marriage. But nothing had prepared me for being mocked at my own father's funeral by the family who claimed to love the woman I adored. Then the Duke's solicitor stepped forward with a sealed letter, and the laughter died. Wait, before the next confession unfolds. If this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. The chapel of St. Michael's stood gray and cold that November morning in 1847, its ancient stones weeping with condensation as if the very walls mourned my father's passing. I had arrived alone, as I did most places, having walked the 3 miles from the cottage where Constance and I lived on the edge of her family's estate. The Ashfords had not offered their carriage. They never did. My father's coffin was simple pine, unadorned save for a single spray of rosemary I'd gathered from the overgrown garden behind our cottage. I'd placed it there myself, my hands trembling not from cold but from the weight of 3 years' worth of swallowed pride threatening to break free. "How touching," Constance's elder sister murmured to her companion, a girl with 2 bright eyes and a mouth like a knife wound. I kept my eyes on the rosemary. "For remembrance," my mother used to say, back when she was alive, back when my father still smiled, back when the name Ashford meant nothing to me but a distant aristocratic echo in a county full of such echoes. The Ashfords occupied the first 3 pews like an invading army. Lady Beatrice in black silk that probably cost more than my father's funeral. Her husband, Lord Edmund, ruddy-faced and bored, Victoria and her husband, a baronet with more debts than honor, and finally Constance's younger brother Richard, barely 18 and already perfecting the family's particular blend of cruelty and carelessness. Constance herself sat at the end of the pew, her profile as perfect and remote as a cameo. 3 years since our wedding day, and I still caught my breath when I looked at her. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, eyes the color of storm clouds over the sea, a mouth that had once smiled at me with something that might have been love. That was before she learned what I truly was, or rather, what her family insisted I was. "The fortune hunter buries his benefactor," Lady Beatrice said, not even bothering to lower her voice. "How convenient that the old Duke chose now to die." The words struck like physical blows. I forced myself to breathe, to stand still, to not turn and face them. My father was not yet in the ground. I would not dishonor him by creating a scene in God's house, no matter how richly they deserved my rage. "Mother, please," Constance whispered, but there was no force behind it, no real rebuke. "Don't mother please me, girl. We all know what he is, what he's always been. Your father and I tried to warn you, but you were so convinced he loved you." Lady Beatrice laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "As if love ever paid for anything." I had loved her. God help me, I loved her still. The vicar cleared his throat uncomfortably and began the service. His voice droned through the familiar prayers while my mind drifted back 3 years to a different church, a different ceremony. I'd met Constance at a county assembly, one of those affairs where the local gentry gathered to gossip and dance and evaluate potential matches for their children. I'd been there only because my father insisted, despite my protests, that we didn't belong in such company. We were respectable, certainly. My father was the Duke of Ashford's physician, a position he'd held for 30 years, but we were not aristocracy. "You're as educated as any man in that room," my father had said, adjusting my cravat with hands that had already begun to tremble with the palsy that would eventually kill him. "You've studied at Cambridge. You speak 4 languages. You understand estate management better than half these lordlings who inherited their positions. Hold your head high, Thomas." Thomas Ashford. No relation to the Ashfords of Ashford Hall, though we shared the name through some distant ancestral branch. My father had found the coincidence amusing. I'd found it a curse. But that night, Constance had smiled at me. We danced 3 times, which was scandalous enough to set tongues wagging. She'd laughed at my jokes, debated philosophy with genuine passion, and when I'd walked her to her family's carriage at evening's end, she'd let her hand linger in mine just a moment longer than propriety demanded. "I hope to see you again, Mr. Ashford," she'd said. And I, fool that I was, had fallen completely and irrevocably in love. Our courtship had been brief and intense, 6 weeks of stolen conversations, chaperoned walks, and increasingly desperate longing. I'd been honest with her from the beginning. I had no fortune, only education and prospects. I was my father's sole heir, which meant I would inherit his cottage, his books, and precisely nothing else. "I don't care about fortune," she'd insisted, her eyes fierce with conviction. "My parents have enough money." I want more than comfort. I want passion. I want partnership. I want you. Wed married against her parents' wishes, with only my father and Constance's elderly aunt as witnesses. Lord Edmund had refused to attend, declaring that his daughter was dead to him. Lady Beatrice had been more pragmatic. She'd attended the wedding only to make clear her disapproval, standing in the back of the church with a face like winter itself. The first year hadn't been too terrible. Constance had tried to bridge the gap between her family and me, hosting dinners in our tiny cottage, visiting Ashford Hall with forced cheerfulness. But the Ashfords knew how to wage war through 1,000 tiny cuts. They'd forgotten to invite us to Victoria's birthday celebration. They'd sent servants to summon Constance home for trivial matters, always when I was away visiting patients with my father. They'd made it clear, in ways both subtle and blatant, that I was not welcome in their homes or their lives. And slowly, inevitably, Constance had begun to change. The fierce girl who'd argued philosophy became quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped defending me when her mother made snide comments. She started spending more time at Ashford Hall, returning to our cottage later and later, always with some excuse about helping with estate matters or keeping her mother company. "They're my family, Thomas," she'd said when I finally confronted her. "What do you want me to do? Cut them off completely?" "I want you to stand beside me," I'd replied, "as you promised you would." She looked at me with something that might have been pity. "I do stand beside you, but must you always be so sensitive? They're just words." Just words? As if words couldn't kill as surely as any blade. The final rupture had come 6 months ago, when my father's health began to fail in earnest. The palsy that had started in his hands spread to his legs, then to his chest, making each breath a labored effort. He needed constant care, and I'd taken on his remaining patients myself, working dawn to dusk to keep our small income flowing. "Your father should be in hospital," Lady Beatrice had announced when she deigned to visit our cottage, her nose wrinkling at the modest surroundings. This is unseemly. Constance shouldn't have to live like this, watching an old man die. He's dying in his home, surrounded by love, I'd replied, my voice tight with suppressed fury, which is more than your money could buy. She'd smiled then, a terrible smile. Love, is that what you call it? We all know why you married Constance, Mr. Ashford. The coincidence of names was too convenient, wasn't it? You thought perhaps the Duke might be confused, might leave something to the wrong Ashford in his will. The accusation had been so absurd, so viciously unfair, that I'd actually laughed. You think I married your daughter for money I didn't even know existed? The Duke's fortune means nothing to me. Then you're a worse fortune hunter than we thought. At least admit your greed honestly. Constance had stood silent through this exchange, her face pale, her hands twisted in her lap. When her mother left, she'd turned to me with eyes full of tears. Thomas, Don't, I'd cut her off. If you believed even for a moment that I married you for anything but love, then we have nothing left to say to each other. She'd gone to her mother's house that night and had spent more time there than at our cottage ever since. We existed in a strange limbo, still married, but no longer truly together, connected only by legal bonds that felt more like chains with each passing day. And now my father was dead, and the Ashfords had come to his funeral as if it were theater, as if his death were merely another opportunity to remind me of my place. The vicar finished his prayers. The pallbearers, hired men who'd never met my father, lifted the coffin. I processed out to the churchyard where a simple grave waited, already dug, the earth piled beside it like a dark wound in the ground. I stood at the grave's edge as they lowered my father down. I wanted to speak, to say something worthy of the man who'd taught me medicine and honor, and how to hold my head high even when the world tried to grind you down. But my throat closed, and no words came.
"A pauper's burial,"
Victoria whispered, loud enough to carry. How appropriate. I closed my eyes, breathed, found the iron core of dignity my father had always insisted I maintain. He was a better man than any in your family, I said quietly, and he's worth 1,000 of your silk dresses and empty honors. Shocked silence. Lord Edmund's face turned purple. Lady Beatrice opened her mouth, surely to deliver some crushing retort. But before she could speak, a carriage rolled through the churchyard gates. It was magnificent, black lacquered wood with the Ashford crest emblazoned in gold on the door, pulled by 4 matched horses. I processed out to the churchyard where a simple grave waited, already dug, the earth piled beside it like a dark wound in the ground. I stood at the grave's edge as they lowered my father down. I wanted to speak, to say something worthy of the man who'd taught me medicine and honor and how to hold my head high even when the world tried to grind you down. But my throat closed and no words came. "A pauper's burial," Victoria whispered, loud enough to carry. How appropriate. I closed my eyes, breathed, found the iron core of dignity my father had always insisted I maintain. He was a better man than any in your family, I said quietly, and he's worth 1,000 of your silk dresses and empty honors. Shocked silence. Lord Edmund's face turned purple. Lady Beatrice opened her mouth, surely to deliver some crushing retort. But before she could speak, a carriage rolled through the churchyard gates. It was magnificent, black lacquered wood with the Ashford crest emblazoned in gold on the door, pulled by 4 matched horses so perfect they seemed like something from a fairy tale. The driver wore ducal livery. Footmen jumped down to open the door. An elderly man emerged, dressed in severe black, carrying a leather case. I recognized him instantly, James Thornton, the Duke's solicitor, a man I'd seen perhaps twice in my life, always at a distance. He walked straight to my father's graveside, ignoring the Ashfords completely, and bowed to me with the kind of respect usually reserved for nobility. "Mr. Thomas Ashford." His voice was crisp, professional. "Yes. I couldn't imagine what business the Duke's solicitor had with me, today of all days. I apologize for the timing, but His Grace, the late Duke of Ashford, was most insistent that this matter be handled immediately upon the death of your father, Dr. Henry Ashford. I have a letter to be read publicly, in the presence of witnesses." He glanced at the assembled Ashfords with something that might have been distaste. "These witnesses will suffice." "I don't understand," I began. "You will." He broke the seal on the letter and began to read in a voice that carried across the churchyard. "To Thomas Ashford, son of my dear friend Henry, I write this letter to be read upon Henry's death, that the truth may finally be known and justice, long delayed, may be served." I felt the world tilt. Behind me, I heard Lady Beatrice's sharp intake of breath. Thornton continued, his voice steady and implacable. "I am dying, as you may know. The cancer that killed my wife now claims me, and I have only weeks, perhaps days, remaining. In this time, I find myself thinking often of old sins and older friendships. Henry Ashford was my friend for 40 years. He saved my life twice, once from pneumonia in my youth, and once from despair after my beloved Margaret's death. He never asked for anything in return, never sought to capitalize on our connection. He was that rarest of things, a truly honorable man. You, Thomas, are his son, and I have watched your life with great interest. I know of your education, your marriage, and the treatment you have received from certain quarters. I know that you have been called a fortune hunter, that your wife's family has persecuted you for the crime of bearing my family name while lacking my blood. This has troubled me greatly. Lord Edmund made a strangled sound. Constance had gone white as snow. Therefore, I have made the following arrangements. Upon Henry's death and the reading of this letter, the following shall take effect immediately. First, to Thomas Ashford, son of my friend, I leave the entirety of my personal fortune, amounting to some £80,000, to be released to him without condition or restriction. The world stopped. £80,000! A fortune so vast I couldn't even properly conceptualize it. Lady Beatrice made a sound like a dying animal. Second, to Thomas Ashford, I leave Thornfield Park, the second largest estate in the county, comprising some 3,000 acres, the manor house, and all associated properties and incomes. This was to have been Margaret's dowry, had she been born a son. Instead, it goes to the son of my heart, if not my blood. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The words were washing over me like a tide. Third, and finally, I have certain instructions regarding my title and primary estate, Ashford Hall. This was when Lord Edmund found his voice. "That's impossible. The entail—" "The entail is broken, my lord," Thornton said coldly. "His Grace arranged it with Parliament 2 years ago, at considerable expense. Please allow me to finish. Ashford Hall and the ducal title have been held by the Ashford family, the family currently headed by Lord Edmund Ashford, for 3 generations, through a distant cousin's marriage to my great-aunt. They are not my direct descendants. They have no blood claim to my name, only a legal one created by convenience and circumstance. I therefore strip them of the ducal title, which reverts to the crown, to be disposed of as His Majesty sees fit. Ashford Hall itself, being unentailed property purchased by my grandfather, I leave in its entirety to Thomas Ashford, with the following condition: that Lady Constance Ashford, currently married to Thomas, be granted the right to remain in residence for as long as she wishes, whether the marriage continues or not. She is innocent in her family's schemes, and I would not see her homeless." Constance collapsed, literally fell to her knees in the grass, her perfect composure shattered. Victoria was sobbing. Lord Edmund looked as if you might have an apoplexy. Richard had gone gray as old meat. Only Lady Beatrice still had fight in her. She stepped forward, her voice shaking with fury. "This is a fraud. That letter cannot be genuine." "My husband is the Duke of Ashford. We are—" "You are nothing, madam," Thornton said with icy precision. "As of this moment, you are Lady Beatrice Ashford, wife of Lord Edmund Ashford, gentleman. You hold no title beyond that of courtesy. Your husband never was the Duke. He was the heir presumptive, and His Grace has exercised his right to disinherit that line entirely. But the estate, our home, was never legally yours. You have resided there by grace of the late Duke. That grace is now withdrawn." He turned to me. "Mr. Ashford, or should I say, sir, as you are now the largest landowner in the county, I have the keys to Ashford Hall. I also have detailed financial records, as His Grace suspected there might be some irregularities in the estate management. We will, of course, conduct a full audit." Lord Edmund made a run for it, actually turned and tried to flee across the churchyard. Two of the footmen from the ducal carriage moved with professional efficiency, catching him before he'd gone 10 steps. "Let me add," Thornton continued, consulting another paper, "that His Grace anticipated this reaction. He notes that Lord Edmund has been systematically embezzling from the estate for the past 7 years, to the sum of approximately £12,000. This money was supposedly used for improvements that were never made. His Grace chose not to prosecute while he lived, but he has left detailed evidence for you to pursue justice if you wish, sir." I couldn't speak, couldn't move. This had to be a dream, some fever hallucination brought on by grief and exhaustion. But Thornton was still talking, still revealing secrets. "The late Duke also asked me to convey his personal apology, sir. He knew of the treatment you suffered at this family's hands. He wanted to intervene earlier, but his illness prevented it, and he feared that revealing his intentions would make matters worse for you. He hoped this would serve as both justice and recompense." He handed me the leather case. "All the relevant documents are here. Deeds, bank drafts, keys, and a private letter for your eyes only. I am at your service for whatever you require in the coming days. The Duke's other bequests, to servants, to charities, are being handled separately. This matter he wanted settled first, and publicly. Finally, I found my voice. Why publicly? Because, sir, he wanted no doubt about your legitimacy. He wanted the world, especially this family, to understand that you earned his respect through character, not manipulation. That you are everything they are not. Honorable, honest, and worthy of the name Ashford." Behind me, someone was crying. I turned to see Constance still on her knees, tears streaming down her face, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Lady Beatrice had regained some composure, though her face was twisted with hatred. "This isn't over. We'll contest the will. "You'll do nothing, madam," Thornton said. "The will is ironclad. His Grace spent 2 years ensuring every legal detail was perfect. Contest it if you wish. You'll bankrupt yourself in legal fees and lose regardless." He bowed to me one final time. "I'll leave you to grieve, sir. When you're ready, send word, and I'll help you take possession of your properties, perhaps in a few days." I nodded numbly. He withdrew to the carriage with his men, leaving Lord Edmund crumpled on the ground like discarded laundry. The vicar, who'd been frozen in shock throughout this entire exchange, cleared his throat. "The, interment?" "Yes," I whispered. "Please." They finished filling in my father's grave while my wife's family stood in ruins around me, and the solicitor's carriage rolled away down the lane. I stood until the last shovelful of earth was placed, until the rosemary on top of the grave was the only bright thing in a world gone dark and strange. Then I turned to face them. Lord Edmund wouldn't meet my eyes. Victoria was clinging to her husband, both of them looking like they'd witnessed the apocalypse. Richard seemed too stunned to react at all. But Lady Beatrice and Constance, they were looking at me with very different expressions. Lady Beatrice's face showed pure calculation. Already, I could see her mind working, trying to find an angle, a way to salvage something from this disaster. Constance just looked broken. "Thomas," she whispered, "I didn't know any of it, I swear." "Not here," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. "Not at my father's grave." "But we need to." "Not here." I walked away from them, from the grave, from everything. I walked the 3 miles back to the cottage in a daze, Thornton's leather case clutched in my hands like a talisman. Only when I was inside, door locked, curtains drawn, did I open the private letter the Duke had left for me. "Thomas, if you are reading this, then both your father and I are gone from this world, and you have just experienced what I imagined was the most shocking afternoon of your life. I apologize for the theatrical nature of the revelation, but some truths require witnesses. Your father and I met at Cambridge 50 years ago. He was a scholarship student, the son of a country apothecary. I was the Duke's heir, drowning in expectations and old money. We should never have been friends, but we were. He saved my life more than once, not just medically, but spiritually. When my father arranged my marriage to a woman I didn't love, Henry talked me through it. When that woman died, giving birth to a stillborn son, Henry sat with me through the dark nights and reminded me that life was still worth living. I remarried to my beloved Margaret and knew happiness. We had no children, which was both a sorrow and a relief. No child to trap in this gilded cage of aristocracy. When Margaret died, I nearly followed her. Your father prevented it. He physically restrained me when I would have ended my pain. He forced me to live, to keep going, and eventually I was grateful. So when I learned you had married into the Ashford family, those distant cousins who'd always presumed they would inherit my title, I began watching more carefully. I saw how they treated you, how they poisoned your wife's love with their venom, how they mocked you for being everything their money and titles could never make them: educated, honorable, decent. I wanted to intervene sooner, but illness weakens us, makes us cautious, and I feared that revealing my intentions would make your life worse before it made it better. So I did what I could. I broke the entail, disinherited them, and gave you the tools to build a life worthy of your father's son. What you do with it is your choice. You could sell everything and leave England entirely. You could keep it and become a power in the county. You could use it for good or ill. But I hope, I pray, you will use it as your father would have, with honor, with mercy, and with the understanding that wealth and title mean nothing compared to the content of a man's character. One more thing, Constance. I believe she truly loved you, Thomas. I think her family broke her, as they break everything they touch. What you do about your marriage is your affair, but remember, She is as much a victim of her family's poison as you are. Forgive an old man's meddling, and know that your father was proud of you every day of his life. Yours in friendship and respect, James Arthur Ashford, Duke of Ashford, briefly. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. Then I carefully folded it, placed it back in the case, and sat in the growing darkness of my cottage, that tomorrow I would probably leave forever, and wept. For my father, for the Duke's kindness. For the innocence I'd lost, and the future I'd gained, and the impossible, terrible choice I now faced. I had everything the Ashfords had tormented me for lacking, but I'd lost the only thing I'd ever truly wanted, my wife's love. Outside, the sun set over a world that had changed completely. Inside, I sat in shadows and wondered what came next. The knock came at dawn. I hadn't slept, had spent the night sitting in my father's chair, staring at nothing, my mind churning through implications and possibilities until everything blurred into exhaustion. The knock came again, soft but insistent. I opened the door to find Constance standing in the gray morning light, still wearing her black morning dress from yesterday, her hair unpinned and wild around her shoulders. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "May I come in?" Her voice was hoarse. I stood aside. She entered, and the cottage seemed to shrink around us. Or perhaps it was that we'd grown too large for it, that the revelations of yesterday had made us too substantial for such a small space. "I came to apologize," she said without preamble, "for everything, for 3 years of everything." "Constance, no, please, let me speak before I lose my courage." She turned to face me, and in the dawn light, I could see how much she'd aged in our 3 years of marriage. The girl who danced with me at that county assembly was gone, replaced by this hollowed-out woman with shadows under her eyes. "I fell in love with you the moment you quoted Dante at me during our first waltz. Do you remember? 'Love that can quickly seize the gentle heart,'" I quoted softly. "Took hold of him because of the fair form that was taken from me. How it happened still wounds me. I thought I'd found someone who saw me as more than an advantageous marriage, more than a dowry in silk dresses. You looked at me like I was real." Her voice cracked. "And I destroyed it. I let them destroy it. They're your family." "They're poison." The words came out fierce, almost violent. I didn't see it at first. The little comments seemed like concern. Mother saying you seemed too eager, that perhaps you'd married me too quickly. Father wondering aloud why you'd never mentioned your inheritance, as if you had one to mention. Victoria suggesting that perhaps you'd engineered our meeting, that the shared surname was too convenient. I never engineered anything. I know that now. I think I always knew it, underneath the doubts they seeded. But they were so persistent, Thomas. Every day some new insinuation. Every visit to their house, another story about fortune hunters or schemes or ambitious young men who'd ruined naive girls. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the wool dress. And I was weak. I wanted to believe them because believing them was easier than admitting I'd shattered my relationship with my family for a marriage they'd never accept. If you were secretly mercenary, then they were right, and I was the fool. If you were honest, then they were cruel, and I'd have to choose between you and them. So you chose them? I chose cowardice. She looked at me directly, her gray eyes swimming with tears. I moved between your world and theirs, trying to please everyone, and ended up betraying the one person who deserved my loyalty. You asked me to stand beside you, and I couldn't even manage that. The truth of it sat between us like a physical thing. I wanted to rage at her, to tell her how every silence had cut deeper than her mother's insults, how watching her slip away had been like dying by inches. But I was too tired for anger. Why are you here, Constance? Because yesterday I watched you bury your father with dignity while my family mocked you, and you never broke. Because I saw you receive a fortune and title, and your first instinct was to honor the man who gave it to you, not to gloat or take revenge. Because I realized that in 3 years of doubting you, I never once saw you be anything but exactly who you claimed to be, honest, honorable, and utterly out of my league. She moved closer, and I could smell her perfume. Lavender and something else I'd never been able to identify, a scent I'd loved and lost. I'm here because I love you. I never stopped loving you, even when I failed you. And I'm here to tell you that I understand if you can't forgive me. The Duke's wills gives me the right to stay at Ashford Hall, but I won't claim it if you don't want me there. I'll go anywhere you ask. I'll do anything you ask. But please, Thomas, please give me one chance to stand beside you the way I should have from the beginning. The dawn light strengthened, filling the cottage with pale gold. I looked at my wife, my beautiful, broken wife, and felt something shift in my chest. "Do you remember," I said slowly, "the night before our wedding? We were in your aunt's garden, and you asked me what I wanted from life. You said you wanted to heal people, to follow in your father's footsteps. I said I wanted to matter, not to be important or famous, but to matter to someone, to be necessary." I took her hand, felt how cold her fingers were. "You were supposed to be that person, Constance. You were supposed to be the one who made me matter." "I'm sorry." The words were barely whisper. "I'm so sorry." I know. And I did. I could see it in every line of her face, hear it in every broken syllable. But sorry isn't enough. Not yet. She nodded, tears spilling over. "I understand. I'm going to take possession of Ashford Hall. I'm going to audit your father's books and likely prosecute him for theft. I'm going to become exactly what your family feared most, someone with the power to destroy them. I know. And you're going to stand beside me while I do it. Not behind me, not off to the side trying to keep peace with your mother. Beside me. Publicly. Completely." She drew herself up, and for a moment I saw the fierce girl from the assembly again, the one who'd argued philosophy and declared she wanted passion over comfort. Yes. "It won't be easy. They'll hate you for it." They already hate me. They think I knew about the Duke's will, that I was part of some elaborate scheme. Mother barely looked at me after the funeral. Victoria called me a traitor. She laughed, a bitter sound. For once, I'd like to earn their hatred honestly. I studied her face, looking for deception or doubt, but found only exhausted determination. If I take you back, if I give you this chance, and you fail me again, I won't be able to survive it. Do you understand? Once more, and I break. I understand. She squeezed my hand. No more cowardice. No more trying to please everyone. You're my husband. You're my choice. And I'm going to prove to you that I deserve to be your wife. I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. But trust, once broken, doesn't heal cleanly. "Then come with me today," I said. "We'll go to Thornton together. We'll start the process of taking possession of the properties. And your family will see us united. No more doubt." "Together," she agreed. We stood there in the dawn-lit cottage, hands linked, both of us damaged and scared, and clinging to the fragile hope that love might be enough to bridge 3 years of betrayal and pain. Outside, the world was waking. Birds sang in the overgrown garden. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. And I thought of my father, who'd taught me that honor mattered more than ease, of the Duke who'd given me the tools for justice, of the 3 years I'd spent being ground down by aristocratic cruelty. They'd wanted to destroy me. Instead, they'd forged me into steel. Now it was time to see what that steel could cut through. Thornton's office occupied the ground floor of an elegant building in the county seat, all dark wood and leather and the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Constance and I arrived in the Duke's carriage, my carriage now, though the thought still felt surreal, and the sight of it caused a minor sensation. The solicitor's clerk nearly dropped his papers when we entered. "Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, Mr. Thornton is expecting you. Please, this way." Thornton himself rose when we entered his private office, a vast room lined with law books and file cabinets. "Mr. Ashford, Mrs. Ashford." His eyes flickered between us, noting our linked hands, and something like approval crossed his face. "I'm pleased you came together." "We're facing this together," Constance said, her voice steady, "whatever comes." An excellent approach. He gestured to chairs facing his desk. "I have considerable paperwork for you to review, but first, let me explain the full scope of what you've inherited." He spread out a map of the county, marking properties with his finger. "Thornfield Park is here, roughly 8 miles from Ashford Hall. It's a smaller estate, only 3,000 acres, but it's been beautifully maintained. His Grace used it as a private retreat. The house has 20 rooms, formal gardens, a small lake, and tenant farms that generate approximately £4,000 per year." £4,000 per year, more than my father had earned in his entire life. "The £80,000 in cash is deposited with Cutts Bank in London," Thornton continued. "I have the drafts here. That amount, invested conservatively, should generate another £3,000 to £4,000 annually in income. I did the mathematics in my head. £7,000 to £8,000 per year just from these 2 sources. A gentleman's income, enough to live comfortably for life." "And then there's Ashford Hall," Thornton said, his tone changing slightly. "This is more complicated." He produced a thick file. "The estate comprises 12,000 acres, the main house of 60 rooms, 3 tenant farms, 2 villages, extensive woodlands, and various other properties. It should generate approximately £12,000 per year in income." "Should," I caught the qualifier. "Lord Edmund has been grossly mismanaging the estate for years. Rents haven't been collected properly, repairs have been neglected, and, as I mentioned yesterday, there's substantial evidence of embezzlement. The actual current income is closer to 7,000. He produced a thick file. "The estate comprises 12,000 acres, the main house of 60 rooms, 3 tenant farms, 2 villages, extensive woodlands, and various other properties. It should generate approximately £12,000 per year in income." "Should?" I caught the qualifier. "Lord Edmund has been grossly mismanaging the estate for years. Rents haven't been collected properly, repairs have been neglected, and, as I mentioned yesterday, there's substantial evidence of embezzlement. The actual current income is closer to 7,000, much of which has been going directly into Lord Edmund's pockets." Constance made a small, hurt sound. Thornton glanced at her sympathetically. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ashford. Your father has been stealing from the estate systematically. I have documentation of false expenditures, diverted rents, and even some instances of outright theft of valuable items from the house." "What valuable items?" I asked. "Artwork, primarily. Several paintings from the Duke's collection have disappeared over the past 5 years. Lord Edmund claimed they were sold to pay for roof repairs that never actually happened. The paintings are likely in his private collection or sold to collectors." My jaw tightened. "Can we prove this?" "Absolutely. His Grace kept meticulous records. He knew what was happening, but chose not to act while he lived. He preferred to leave the matter to you, with the evidence needed for prosecution if you chose to pursue it." "I do." The words came out harder than I intended. They called me a thief, a fortune hunter, a parasite. They're going to learn what real theft looks like. Constance's hand tightened on mine. Support, not restraint. Thornton nodded approvingly. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already been in contact with the magistrate. Lord Edmund has been requested to appear for questioning next week. In the meantime, we need to secure the premises. Secure? Lord Edmund and his family are currently still in residence at Ashford Hall. You have the legal right to evict them immediately, but it might be wiser to give them a few days to remove their personal belongings. However, we should inventory the house's contents today to ensure nothing else disappears. I looked at Constance. Your family is about to be thrown out of their home. How do you feel about that? Her face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. They stole from a dying man. They've been living on money that should have gone to maintaining the estate, paying the servants, helping the tenants. Whatever comes to them, they've earned it. Your mother? My mother knew. The words came out flat, certain. She had to know. She managed the household accounts. Every false expenditure, every missing painting, she either knew or chose not to look. Either way, she's complicit. Thornton produced a ring of keys. These are for Ashford Hall. All the main doors, the cellars, the private rooms. Shall we proceed? The ride to Ashford Hall took an hour. I'd been to the estate 3 times during my marriage. Twice for dinners, where I was treated like an exotic curiosity. Once for Victoria's wedding, where I was seated with the servants. Each time, the grand house had seemed like a monument to everything I lacked. A physical manifestation of the gap between who I was and who Constance's family thought I should be. Now, it was mine. The approach was dramatic, a long drive through parkland, cultivated woods giving way to manicured lawns, and then the house itself, a magnificent Palladian mansion in honey-colored stone, 3 stories of classical perfection with columns and pediments and more windows than I could count. But even from a distance, I could see the neglect. Weeds in the gravel drive, overgrown ivy creeping across the facade, a crack in one of the ground floor windows, repaired with paper and pitch rather than replaced. The rot is both literal and figurative, Thornton observed. The roof needs significant work. The east wing is barely habitable, and that's just what's visible externally. The carriage stopped at the front entrance. Before we could alight, the doors burst open and Lady Beatrice emerged like an avenging fury, followed by Lord Edmund and Victoria. "You have no right!" Lady Beatrice shrieked. "This is our home!" Thornton descended from the carriage with professional calm. "This is Mr. Ashford's property, madam. You are trespassing." "Trespassing in the house we've lived in for 30 years. The house you've been allowed to live in by grace of the late Duke. That grace has ended." He produced papers from his case. "This is a formal notice of eviction. You have 3 days to remove your personal belongings. Anything belonging to the estate stays." Lord Edmund tried bluster. "This is absurd. We'll contest the will." "Will? You'll find yourself in prison if you're not careful," Thornton cut him off. "The magistrate has questions about missing estate funds. I'd advise you to cooperate with this eviction rather than make your situation worse." Victoria turned to Constance, who was descending from the carriage behind me. "How can you do this to us? We're your family." "You stole from a dying man," Constance said quietly. "You mocked my husband at his father's funeral. You called him a fortune hunter while you were literally hunting his fortune. I love you, Victoria, but I love justice more." "Justice?" Lady Beatrice's voice dripped venom. "This isn't justice, it's revenge. He's poisoned you against your own blood." "No," Constance moved to stand beside me, her shoulder touching mine. "You did that yourselves, over 3 years of lies and manipulation. Thomas gave me one chance. I'm choosing him. The look of betrayal on her mother's face was almost pitiable. Almost. Then you're dead to us, Lady Beatrice spat. All of you. Our daughter died the day she married that... Careful, I said softly. You're speaking to the man who now controls your immediate future. I can make your eviction pleasant or excruciating. Your choice. She went white, then red, then turned on her heel and stalked back into the house. Lord Edmund followed, but Victoria lingered, looking at Constance with something between hatred and desperation. "You'll regret this," she said. "When his money's gone, when this revenge fantasy ends, you'll regret choosing him over us." "I already regretted choosing you over him," Constance replied. "At least this way, I get to live with someone I respect." Victoria left. We stood in the spreading silence, watching the door close on Constance's old life. "That was well done," Thornton said quietly. "Both of you. Shall we inspect the property?" The house was magnificent and heartbreaking. Every room showcased beauty marred by neglect. Stunning plasterwork cracked and water-stained. Priceless furniture dusty and faded. Carpets worn thin from use and lack of care. "They lived here like it was a hotel," Constance said, her voice thick with shame. "Took everything, maintained nothing." The library was particularly bad. The Duke's collection of rare books had been valuable. Many of the best volumes were simply gone. Empty spaces on the shelves, like missing teeth. "Your father's doing?" I asked gently. "Or my mother's. She liked to sell things when she wanted new dresses." Constance touched one of the empty shelves. "I never questioned where the money came from. I never thought about the fact that we lived beyond the estate's income. I just accepted it." "You were raised to accept it," Thornton said. "The nobility train their children to ignore such matters." We moved through drawing rooms and ballrooms, bedrooms and servants' quarters, cataloging damage and theft. Thornton's clerk scribbled notes, creating an inventory that grew more damning with each room. The master bedroom, the Duke's own room, was the worst. They'd stripped it bare, taking everything of value, leaving only the bed frame and a single cracked mirror. "This is desecration," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "He trusted them with his home, and they gutted it like a carcass." "They've been doing it for years," Thornton confirmed. "Little by little, selling off anything portable. His Grace noticed, but chose not to confront them. I think he felt guilty for the entail, for trapping them in expectations of inheritance that were never real. So he let them rob him? He let them reveal themselves." Thornton closed his notebook. "Now we have complete documentation of their crimes. Enough to prosecute criminally, if you wish, or at minimum to ensure they repay what was stolen." I looked around the ruined room, thinking of the Duke dying in some other residence while these parasites stripped his ancestral home. They'll repay every penny, and they'll do it publicly, so everyone knows what they are. We finished the inspection as afternoon light slanted through dirty windows. The final tally was staggering. At least £20,000 worth of missing art, furnishings, and valuables, plus the embezzled funds and years of neglected maintenance. "This will take years to restore," Constance said, standing in the great hall, looking up at the water-stained ceiling. "And cost a fortune." "Good thing I have a fortune now," I replied, "and time, and a very strong motivation to undo everything your family did to this place." She turned to me, and in the fading light, she looked ethereal, like a ghost haunting her own former life. "Thomas, I need to ask you something." "What?" "When you restore this house, when you make it beautiful again, will there be a place for me in it? Or am I just another piece of damage your in-laws left behind? The question hit me like a blow. I realized I'd been so focused on justice, on setting things right, that I hadn't actually decided what came after. Did I forgive her? Could I? She saw we hesitate, and something died in her eyes. That's answer enough. No, wait, I caught her hand before she could turn away. I don't know yet. That's the honest truth. I want to forgive you. I want to rebuild what we had, but I can't just forget 3 years of being slowly poisoned by doubt. I understand. But, I continued, I also can't forget that you came to me this morning, that you stood beside me today, that you chose me over them when the choice finally mattered. Is that enough? I don't know. But, I continued, I also can't forget that. I pulled her closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her gray eyes. Help me restore this house. Live here with me. Work beside me. Let me see if the girl I married is still somewhere inside the woman you've become, and we'll find out together if enough is enough. She kissed me then, soft and desperate, tasting of salt tears and hope. When we pulled apart, Thornton was politely examining the ceiling. "I'll give you two a moment," he said diplomatically. "I'll be in the library, beginning the formal inventory for the magistrate." He withdrew, leaving us alone in the echoing hall of a house that was mine, but didn't feel like home, with a wife I loved, but didn't fully trust, standing in the ruins of a family that had tried to destroy us both. "I won't let you down again," Constance whispered. "I swear it on everything I have." "Then help me prove it," I replied. "Starting now. Your family has 3 days to leave. Make sure they only take what's actually theirs." Her eyes hardened. "With pleasure." Over the next 3 days, Constance proved her commitment in ways both small and significant. She stood guard over the house, checking every item her family tried to remove, cross-referencing against inventories, refusing to let them take so much as a candlestick that belonged to the estate. The fights were spectacular. Lady Beatrice screamed that Constance was betraying her blood. Victoria wept and pleaded. Lord Edmund tried threats, then bribes, then finally defeated silence. Through it all, Constance remained firm. "This isn't your house. It never was. You're guests who've overstayed your welcome." They left on the 3rd day in a hired carriage, their possessions reduced to what they'd actually purchased themselves, heading for a rented house in Bath that would drain their remaining funds within months. Richard was the last to go. He stopped in front of me, barely 18 and trying so hard to maintain dignity. "I didn't know," he said quietly, "about the theft, about any of it. I thought we were just living on what was ours." "I believe you," I replied, and I did. Richard had been a child when this started, raised to see luxury as normal, never questioning the source. "Will you prosecute?" He looked terrified. "Your father, yes. Your mother, possibly. You?" I studied his face. "That depends on what kind of man you become. You have a choice now. You can follow your parents' example, or you can learn from their mistakes. Choose wisely." He nodded and left, shoulders bowed under a weight he'd only just begun to understand. And then the house was ours, empty, damaged, and ours. "Where do we start?" Constance asked, standing in the echoing silence. "With the roof," I said. "Then the foundations. Then, room by room, we make this what it should be. A home? A home where honor matters more than appearance, where honesty matters more than money." I took her hand. "It'll take years." "I have years," she squeezed my fingers, "as many as you'll give me." The restoration of Ashford Hall became the focus of our lives over the next 18 months. We hired the best craftsmen, bought back stolen artwork when we could trace it, and slowly, painfully brought the house back to glory. But more than that, we restored ourselves. Constance threw herself into the work with fierce dedication. She negotiated with craftsmen, sourced materials, managed the household staff we slowly hired. Every day, she proved herself a partner, not just in name, but in truth. And slowly, like the house itself, I began to heal. The trust came back in pieces, small moments. Constance defending me when a tradesman tried to overcharge. Constance staying up late to review accounts with me. Constance choosing to spend her evenings working beside me rather than attending social events with the county ladies who'd never quite accepted her marriage. 6 months in, on a cold spring evening, we stood in the newly restored library, surrounded by books we'd bought to replace the stolen volumes. The shelves were filling again, knowledge replacing emptiness. "Do you remember," Constance said quietly, "the night you proposed? What you said?" I said I would love you until the stars burned out. You said you would love me through anything, through poverty, through scandal, through the world's disapproval. She turned to face me. I didn't understand what that meant then. I thought love was the easy part, that the hard part was convincing my family to accept you. I had it backwards. Love is the work, I agreed. Everything else is just noise. "I'm still working," she said. "Every day. I'll keep working for as long as you need me to." I pulled her close, and this time, when I kissed her, it felt like coming home. "I think," I said against her hair, "I think enough might be enough after all." She pulled back, her eyes shining. "You mean—" "I mean I forgive you. I mean the girl I married isn't hiding somewhere inside you. She's right here, standing in front of me, stronger and braver than she ever was before. I mean I love you, Constance. Still. Again. Always." We made love that night in the master bedroom we'd restored together, in a bed we'd chosen together, in a house that was finally, truly ours. And afterward, lying in the darkness with my wife curled against my side, I thought about my father's grave and the Duke's letter and the moment in the churchyard when my entire world had changed. They'd meant to humiliate me. Instead, they'd freed me, and in a strange way, they'd freed Constance too. Freed her from the cage of her family's expectations, from the poison of their values. We'd both had to be broken before we could be rebuilt properly. The next morning brought a letter from Thornton. The magistrate had ruled in our favor. Lord Edmund was convicted of embezzlement and fraud, sentenced to 3 years in debtor's prison, his assets seized to repay the estate. Lady Beatrice, found complicit, was stripped of her remaining property and left with virtually nothing. Victoria's husband had divorced her, citing her family's crimes as evidence of moral corruption. She'd been reduced to accepting charity from distant relatives. Justice, thorough and complete. But I felt no triumph, only a kind of quiet satisfaction that accounts had been balanced, that honor had been served. "It's done," I told Constance, showing her the letter. She read it without expression, then carefully folded the paper. "My mother will hate me forever for this. Does that bother you?" "It should, but all I feel is relief." She looked at me. "Is that terrible?" "No, it's honest." I took the letter back. "Do you want to visit her? To try one last time?" She considered it, then shook her head. "I've chosen my family. You're my family now, Thomas. You and whatever children we might have. Whatever life we build together. Let her hate me from Bath. I'll love you from here." We sent a formal announcement to the county newspapers. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Ashford of Ashford Hall hosting a public reception to celebrate the restoration of the estate. The response was overwhelming. Everyone wanted to meet the man who'd gone from pauper to landowner overnight, who'd prosecuted his in-laws and won. We were a scandal, a sensation, a story too dramatic not to witness firsthand. The reception was held on a June evening, the house blazing with light, the gardens perfect, everything we'd worked for on full display. And Constance stood beside me, greeting guests, her hand linked with mine, showing the world exactly where she stood. Lord Pemberton, the county's senior aristocrat, took me aside at one point. "I knew the Duke well," he said. "This would have pleased him enormously. Seeing the house restored, seeing you and Mrs. Ashford united, he always believed that character mattered more than blood." "He was right," I replied. "Though I imagine your in-laws would disagree." There was a gleam of amusement in his eyes. "My former in-laws," I corrected. "I consider myself well rid of that connection." "Indeed. Though I hear Lady Beatrice has been writing letters to anyone who'll listen, claiming you manipulated the Duke, forged documents, all manner of slander." "Let her write." I looked across the room to where Constance was laughing with a group of ladies, finally accepted, finally belonging. "The truth is written in stone and deed and court records. Her words are just air." "Well said," he raised his glass. "To honor, then, and to the most dramatic inheritance I've witnessed in 40 years of county society." "To honor," I agreed, "and to the man who taught me what it meant." Later, as the guests departed and the house fell quiet, Constance and I walked through the rooms we'd restored, checking that everything was perfect, that nothing had been damaged during the evening's festivities. "It's beautiful," she said, standing in the great hall where we'd first confronted her family 18 months ago. "Like it was meant to be, but better." "Better because it's honestly earned," I replied. "Every room, every piece, purchased with money that's truly ours. And because we built it together." She turned to me, her face luminous in the candlelight. "Thomas, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in her tone made me wary. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant, about 3 months along." The world stopped, then started again, faster, brighter, more vivid. "Pregnant?" "I wanted to wait until I was sure, until I could be certain this time." Her hand moved to her stomach. "But the physician confirmed it this morning. We're going to have a child." I couldn't speak, could only pull her close and hold her while my mind reeled through implications. A child, an heir, a future that extended beyond just the two of us. "Are you pleased?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Pleased?" I pulled back to look at her face. "Constance, I'm terrified and ecstatic and overwhelmed. I'm going to be a father." "A wonderful father," she said firmly. "The kind who teaches honor by example, who loves without condition, who shows his children what it means to be good rather than just wealthy. Like my father did, like your father did," she agreed. We stood there in the restored great hall of the house that was ours, holding each other and thinking about the future. A future that had seemed impossible just 2 years ago, when I'd stood at my father's grave being mocked and humiliated and broken. Sometimes destruction is necessary before reconstruction. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. I'd lost my father, my naivety, my wife's innocent love. I'd gained wealth, position, and the hard-earned knowledge that character, not circumstance, defines a person. And I'd gained Constance back, not the girl I'd married, but the woman she'd become through fire and trial. Stronger, braver, tested and proven. "Tell me," she said quietly, "if you could go back to that day, knowing everything that was coming, the pain, the betrayal, the humiliation, would you still marry me?" I thought about it, really considered it, then smiled, in a heartbeat. "Why?" "Because the girl I married was lovely but untested." "The woman you've become is magnificent." I kissed her softly. "I fell in love twice, Constance. Once with a dream, and once with the reality. I'd choose the reality every time." She cried, but they were good tears, healing tears. And in the restored beauty of Ashford Hall, with our child growing between us and our future stretching out like an undiscovered country, we made our promises anew. To honor, to honesty, to love that was earned, not assumed, to building something that would last beyond our own lives, something our children could be proud of. The Ashfords, the ones who'd tried to destroy me, were scattered and broken. "The woman you've become is magnificent," I kissed her softly. "I fell in love twice, Constance, once with a dream and once with the reality. I'd choose the reality every time." She cried, but they were good tears, healing tears. And in the restored beauty of Ashford Hall, with our child growing between us and our future stretching out like an undiscovered country, we made our promises anew. To honor, to honesty, to love that was earned, not assumed, to building something that would last beyond our own lives, something our children could be proud of. The Ashfords, the ones who'd tried to destroy me, were scattered and broken. But the Ashfords we were becoming, Constance and I together, were just getting started. 5 years later, I stood in the same churchyard where my father was buried, but this time for a happier occasion. We were dedicating a memorial stone, paid for subscription from everyone in the county who'd benefited from my father's medical care over 40 years of service. Dr. Henry Ashford, physician, friend, and man of honor. He healed more than bodies. My son, James Henry Ashford, age 4, placed flowers at the stone's base with solemn concentration. He had his mother's dark hair and my eyes, and a temperament that was somehow both gentle and stubborn. Behind him, Constance held our daughter, Margaret, barely 1 year old, named for the Duke's beloved wife. The baby babbled and reached for the flowers, wanting to help her brother. "Is grandfather watching?" James asked, his child's voice carrying in the quiet churchyard. "I think so," I replied. "I think he's very proud of you." "And of you, Papa?" "I hope so." I ruffled his hair. I try to be the kind of man he'd be proud of. "You are," Constance said firmly. She came to stand beside me, our daughter on her hip, creating a portrait of family that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. He'd be proud of all of us. The dedication ceremony was attended by half the county. Tenants from our estates, patients my father had treated, colleagues who'd respected him. Even Lord Pemberton came, representing the aristocrat's acknowledgement of a good man's life well lived. Afterward, there was a reception at Ashford Hall, now fully restored and magnificent, the gardens in perfect bloom, the house a showpiece of what wealth and care could achieve when applied with genuine love. "It's remarkable what you've done with the estate," Lord Pemberton said, walking with me through the gardens where James and several other children played under watchful nannies. "Not just the house, but the tenants' cottages, the improvements to the farms. You've doubled the estate's income while reducing rents." "My father taught me that taking care of people was more important than maximizing profits," I replied. "Healthy, happy tenants work better and stay longer." "Revolutionary thinking," he said it wryly, but there was genuine approval in his voice. "I hear you've been advising other estates on similar reforms." When asked, "I believe the old system is dying, Lord Pemberton. The days when aristocrats could simply extract wealth without giving anything back, those days are ending. We either adapt or we become irrelevant." "Like your former in-laws?" I'd heard, of course, everyone had heard. Lord Edmund had died in debtor's prison, broken and alone. Lady Beatrice lived in a tiny cottage in Bath, supported by grudging charity from distant relatives. Victoria had remarried a much older man, trading beauty for security. Richard, to his credit, had emigrated to America and was apparently making something of himself in business. Like them, I agreed. They thought title and name were enough. They didn't understand that those things are meaningless without honor backing them. The Duke understood it. That's why he chose you. Lord Pemberton paused to watch the children play. You have fine children, Ashford. And from what I hear, you're raising them very differently than how your wife was raised. We want them to understand that privilege carries responsibility, that their name and wealth mean nothing if they don't have character to match. I smiled. My father's lessons passed down another generation. The world would be better if more fathers taught those lessons. He turned to leave, then paused. I never told you this, but I was one of the people who encouraged the Duke to break the entail. I'd seen what Lord Edmund was doing to the estate, how he was bleeding it dry. I couldn't stand by and watch him inherit everything to destroy it completely. The Duke asked my advice, and I told him to find someone worthy. I'm glad he chose you. After the guests departed and the house grew quiet, Constance and I sat in the library, her favorite room, she'd declared, because it represented knowledge reclaimed and valued. The children were asleep upstairs, watched by our excellent staff, and we had a rare moment of peace. Do you remember, she said, 5 years ago when you asked if I wanted to visit my mother? To try one last time? You said no. I said no, she confirmed. I've sometimes wondered if that was cruel, if I should have offered her some chance at reconciliation. Do you want to see her now? She considered it, turning her wineglass in her hands. No, but I want to make sure she's cared for. I don't want her to suffer, even if I can't forgive what she did. We could arrange an income, something small but sufficient, anonymous so she never knows it comes from us. Her face lit up. Would you do that? After everything? I'd do it for you, I replied, because you're good enough to think of it, and because showing mercy doesn't mean accepting what she did. It just means we're better than she was. So we arranged it, a small annuity, delivered through Thornton with no indication of source, enough to keep Lady Beatrice comfortable without being generous. Mercy, not reconciliation. And I thought about how far we'd traveled from that awful day at my father's funeral, how much we'd lost and gained, how we'd been broken and rebuilt, how love had nearly died and been resurrected stronger than before. The house around us was beautiful, but the real restoration had been internal. 2 damaged people learning to trust again, learning to build something real from the ruins of illusion. What are you thinking? Constance asked, seeing my distant expression. That I'm grateful for all of it, even the pain, because it brought us here. I pulled her close. If the Duke's will had been read at any other time, in any other way, would we have made it? I don't know. Maybe the shock was necessary. Maybe I needed to see exactly what my family was, needed to choose between them and you with everything on the line. And you chose me. I chose us, she corrected. I chose the people we could be together rather than the people we were forced to be apart. Upstairs, baby Margaret began to cry, a soft sound, quickly soothed by the nurse. The small noises of family life, precious and ordinary. Come to bed, Constance said, standing and offering her hand. Tomorrow you have that meeting with the estate managers, and I have the charity board. And James needs new shoes, and life goes on in all its messy, beautiful complexity. I took her hand and let her lead me upstairs, through the house we'd built together, toward the bedroom where we'd made our children and our peace. Behind us, the library stood quiet, shelves full of knowledge and promise. Outside, the estate stretched in darkness, land we'd restored and improved, tenants we'd cared for, a future we were building one day at a time. And in the churchyard 3 miles away, my father's memorial stone bore witness that honor mattered, that character counted, that a good man's legacy lived on in the choices his children made. I'd been mocked at his funeral by people who thought wealth and title meant everything. I'd been given both and learned they meant nothing without honor to back them. The Duke had known it. My father had lived it. And now, with Constance beside me and our children upstairs and years stretching ahead, I had the privilege of proving it. Not by being perfect, but by being honest, by choosing what was right over what was easy, by building something that would last because it was built on truth rather than appearance. Sometimes the greatest inheritances are the ones you can't see. The values passed down, the lessons learned, the strength forged in fire. My father left me that. The Duke left me the means to use it. And Constance gave me the reason to make it matter. We walked into our bedroom, into our future, into the life we'd chosen and built and earned. And behind us, the house, our house, in every way that mattered, stood as testimony that honor and love could triumph over cruelty and greed. That the pauper mocked at his father's funeral could become the man who showed mercy to his mockers. That the girl who'd betrayed her husband could become the woman who stood beside him unflinching. That families weren't just blood, but choice and commitment and the daily work of being better than you were before. The Duke's will had changed my circumstances, but the choices I made after, those changed everything else.